Welcome to F3 in the Light. This is Crystal M. Cherry, founder of F3, Fabulous Female Fundraisers, and your host for this interview series. I am delighted to highlight the great work of the members of our network. F3 is a supportive space for women of color in fundraising and the nonprofit sector. We provide professional development and fellowship to our members. Learn more about us at fabfemalefundraisers.org. This series is meant to highlight and applaud each member for her accomplishments, to inspire other women of color in the nonprofit space, to share knowledge about multiple facets of fundraising and nonprofit work, and to learn about nonprofits doing amazing work in our communities. Each month, we will feature one F3 member in the light to share her greatness with you. We can't wait to move, delight, humor, and enlighten you on powerful women of color who are making moves in our sector. Enjoy. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Hi there. I am Crystal Cherry. I am so excited to be back with another episode of F3 in the Light, where we're highlighting the accomplishments of our members. And today we have with us my friend, my colleague, my sister, Juanita Sheppard, who I've known in the biz for a few years. And we travel the same circles and know some of the same people. And so, Juanita, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Good. Well, listen, let me start off by asking you, why did you decide to join F3, and what have you received as a result of being a member?
I love F3. I'm talking about F3 all the time. I'm an F3 evangelist in a lot of ways. I will say, the world is complicated. And I believe that F3 really gives me a place to feel grounded. And feel seen and heard and all the things we want to kind of get ourselves together. Because the truth is, as much as I love fundraising can be hard. Fundraising can be draining.
Yes.
Fundraising can be a challenge in a lot of different ways and aspects. And so what I believe F3 has done for me, continues to do for me, is just reaffirm my greatness in a lot of ways.
Yes, I love
that we celebrate, Black and brown girl magic.
Yes.
And embrace our allies as well, but really find a safe place to have the really tough conversations that we need to have sometime, and also to celebrate our expertise. So I love that. I love how we champion each other and celebrate birthdays and anniversaries and really tap into the genius of all that we bring to the organization.
Oh my goodness, that's good. That encapsulates everything that I wanted to happen with F3. But before we start talking about fundraising, I want to know just a little bit about you personally. I want to know, where'd you grow up? How did you find the college that you went to? And what did you do right after college? I'm taking you back. I'm taking you back, girl.
You're taking me way back. So everyone who knows me and follows me on social media, that I am a foodie.
Yes.
I think it comes natural. So I'm originally from New Orleans, born and raised. That is home for me. And so I always tell people New Orleans folk have a different palate when it comes to our taste buds. So grew up in New Orleans. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. Grew up, in neighborhoods that were challenged economically in some ways. So that kind of led me a little bit to this work. Loved what I've done. And I think in 1999-ish, I moved to Atlanta. And so this has been home for me, away from home in a lot of ways. And has been great in terms of connections and building community. And again, I feel like Atlanta is one of the places that helps to help people like me, Black and brown folk, to find their space. And the truth is, and I've shared this with someone, and not that it would have been impossible for me to do what I do in New Orleans, but I'm just honest. I feel like Atlanta provided more opportunity. I feel like that African Americans in New Orleans have some of this opportunity to do the things that we do, but I think it's limited. Where I feel that in Atlanta, there's just much more opportunity for you to spread your wings and to grow.
Okay.
And I believe there's a support network behind it And part of it, I think, is because of the higher education epicenter that is here, with the Morehouse and Spelmans and Clark Atlantas and ITCs and Morris Brown that are here. So I love that. So I think there's space for intellectual curiosity.
Yes.
And moving yourself and stretching yourself beyond where you can see yourself going. So
right. What's so funny, I'm from up north and we say New Orleans. And so I know
my sisters and my brothers will probably say, Lord, she'd have been gone too long.
Shout out to New Orleans or New Orleans, as Juanita has shared. One of my favorite places to visit. The food there is fantastic. The culture there is wonderful, and I love New Orleans. So thank you for sharing that. So tell me a little bit about how you got into fundraising. I know that you've been working, a lot with foundations. People don't think of, foundations as fundraising, but it is actually, giving money away. So I want to find out from you how it's giving as opposed to asking, but still, nonetheless, how did you fall into it?
And like most folks, I fell into this work. I've done things before then. My education and my initial professional development started in higher ed. And so I worked for Tulane University. And while I was in New Orleans, worked my way up. Before I left, I was admissions counselor for Tulane Law School. And so I was literally going all around the country promoting why students should come to Tulane. And I loved the work. But eventually I moved here and got into different careers. And I worked for Coca-Cola. Shout out to Coca-Cola. And I loved it. But it was something about the corporate environment that I felt like I wanted to do more. And honestly, at the time, I didn't understand the role that Coca-Cola University played in that. That might have would have changed me a little bit. But I could not reconcile how the Coke can was changing the world. And how was that making the world a better place? And so did a little soul searching and try to figure out, so what do I do with this and where would I go? And I was blessed. I would say that I was blessed to be offered a position at the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta.
Yes.
And that changed my whole entire world. It really did. Working with Alicia Phillip, who I love.
Yes.
For many years. And Alicia is a longstanding member of Atlanta community who is now off, in her retirement, loving her life in a different country.
Yes.
But shout out to Alicia.
Yeah, she's a legend. She's a legend.
But again, the Community Foundation afforded me an opportunity to really look at the scope of work, look at communities and why funders give to who they give. So this whole analysis of what does that look like? Why do we do this work? What communities, what nonprofits do we give to? And then on the donor side, being able to talk to donors and say, what's most important to you? And finding, that place of synergy or convergence where the community needs and the donors' needs align. And I think that's what I've learned from the Community Foundation. And from that, again, I went back to higher ed and went working at Emory for a long time.
That's right.
In between, I was in seminary and things like that. But again, like most folk, COVID happened. And so in 2000, I was sitting at Emory doing great work, loving it, having a really great career at the university, again, at higher ed. Again, I love higher ed, but really wanted to do something and have a significant impact in my community.
Yes.
And I felt like I wanted to be with an organization that was really helping people. And not that I couldn't find that within Emory, but I wanted to be closer. And so United Way came knocking, and that's why I wound up here.
Yes, yes. I love United Way Atlanta, Milton Little, and all the folks I know there. You guys are doing great work. Well, let me ask you, since you have been doing this work with foundations for a while now with United Way, what would you tell those who are on the receiving end? The fundraisers who are asking and the nonprofits who are asking in terms of what foundations are looking for, particularly now, post-COVID. We've had so much happen. What kinds of things should they do? How should they have their house in order before they start applying for funds from foundations and places like United Way? What kind of things are you all looking for?
So, Crystal, you already know the first thing I'm going to say is get your board together. Get your board together.
Your board together. I love it.
So get your board together. Having a strong vision and mission statement and having community members who will support your mission is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just important in terms of the board to have people who are your friends. You really need people who have skill sets in various aspects of what you're trying to do to be able to do that. So having someone who may be in marketing or social media, having someone who's an accountant or in the financial services area, having somebody, who's a great orator who can really champion your work. All of those things matter on the board. And then secondly, make sure your name is good in community. I would say that people, especially longstanding organizations, a lot of times they take that for granted. And that, because I am XYZ organization, I've been around for 100 years.
Right.
I don't have to put in the effort.
Right. They underestimate the value of that.
They underestimate the value of community voice. Because a lot of times what they don't realize is that we go back in community and say, hey, XYZ community, XYZ organization said that they are doing great work in your community. Have you ever heard of them?
Right.
And when you start getting too many no's, then you're like, okay, is it about marketing? What is it that's not reaching the population that we're asking?
Right.
And it's not just the higher up people. It's like the everyday people. It may be us going to a beauty salon or a barbershop or even to the local laundromat or the post office and just randomly asking people.
I once worked for, I'm not going to mention who it is, but I once worked for a renowned nonprofit who's large. And I think there was some arrogance there. They just kind of assumed that year after year, they were going to continue to get the same funding, the same grants, because they had relationships with those people. But what happens is when those people leave and or retire,
right?
If you've not continued to build relationships with that foundation and had these other things in place that you mentioned, once that new person comes in, they may not feel the same way about you as that other person did, right? And so if you don't have your affairs in order, if you don't have a strong board, if you don't have connections in the community where people are seeing you and feeling the good work that you're doing, then they may not renew you the next year.
Right. Another part of that, and this as well, is relationships matter. And you've kind of hit the nail on that. When people leave, how will people remember you? And also having multiple touch points within an organization matters. And so you may have a strong relationship with one person, but if that person leaves, do you automatically become disconnected? I tell people all the time, again, because I started my career as an administrative assistant, that if the only person you're trying to reach is the program officer, you're missing a whole nother opportunity, because the administrative assistant or the executive assistant may be your next point of contact.
Right.
And so don't discount that assistant.
The gatekeeper, absolutely.
And the last thing I would say about foundations really is around program officers. When you approach us, it's two things that we're looking for. One is we want to know you did your homework. And so in terms of, you should know who else is doing the same or similar work that you're doing in your community. If not, we'll know you haven't done that. Right. The second thing I would say is, in terms of engagement with program officers, make sure that you treat program officers as people and not just looking at their pocketbooks.
And I think that's one of the things that I used to tell my staff when I was on the inside, is that, you have to build relationships with these folks. You don't just apply for the grant and then when we get it, send the thank you note via email. You have to continue to build relationships and invite them to come to the event, send them the annual report, keep them in the loop about what's going on with your organization year round. So when that next grant cycle comes open, right? They've been hearing from you all year. It's not like they haven't heard from you since you asked last year, but they've been hearing from you all year. They're abreast of what's going on with your organization. And they feel like, yes, they want to continue to support you because you kept them in the loop.
Right. And if you're a really strong organization, honestly, even if we get to a place where we can't fund you, we may be speaking to another funder and saying, we can't, provide this amount of funding for a program. But maybe I have a friend who's also in the fundraising space. I can say, you know what, you should really look at this nonprofit organization. So reputation matters.
Right. And I want to give you an opportunity for those who don't know what Unite Way's priorities are, particularly in Atlanta. I want to give you just a quick minute just to share what exactly Unite Way is focusing on.
Sure. Again, our work is definitely around the life and livelihood of our children and their families in Metro Atlanta, 13 counties. Yes. And so we focus our efforts on 4 different investment priorities. And so one is strong learners, and that is really around childhood education. We all know about the K through third grade reading levels. And so we have a strong emphasis on that. But now we're looking at something called the science of reading. So really going back to pre-K now and saying we have to begin earlier than even kindergarten.
Oh, wow.
So that our students are prepared. And so there's a lot of work around that. Another area is around economic stability. And that has a lot of different tentacles to it. And so we do a lot of work around homelessness, financial, skill-based type literacy rates. We do a lot around secure housing. And so things like that. College and career ready is the next area that we're involved in. So again, students who have an opportunity to go to college, especially those who are first generation students, we offer a lot of support around that, as well as career ready, which is really around high potential, high demand jobs. And so we are not looking to help nonprofits who are just trying to place people randomly. And so we're not looking to place people in retail positions. We're not looking to place people in positions that don't pay enough to sustain themselves. So we're looking for those high potential, high demand jobs. And so those are focused in construction, in IT, advanced manufacturing, the medical field. So those areas that we know that you can make a halfway decent salary and be able to live, especially here in Metro Atlanta. And then the last one is our place-based efforts, which is really about how do we empower and bring voice to local communities and how do we help them to advocate for themselves? So as we deal with systems and have to navigate those at every level, how do we help our citizens within particular areas to be able to do that? So at the moment, we're focused on South Fulton, South DeKalb, and the Clayton counties, but we continue to look for those pockets where the needs are.
Oh, I'm so glad you said South Fulton. I live in South Fulton. And, this idea that those who are closest to the problems have the solutions. I love that you're all really focusing on that. Well, let me just ask you. So what would you, based on what you know now, after having been doing this work for a while, what would you tell your younger self? And would there be anything that you'd do differently than you've done?
Yes. My younger self, I would have said two things. Be intentional about building your network, because people can open doors for you that you can't get in sometimes on your own.
Yep.
So sometimes you need those champions. Sometimes you need those sponsors to get in rooms and say your name when you're not able to be present.
Yes.
And so I would say do that. The second thing I would say is when you go to conferences and events and they are experts in the field who are speaking or presenting, and they make the blanket statement, if you have a question, reach out to me, reach out to the expert.
Do it. Okay.
There's so many of my colleagues who talk about how they present at different foundations and organizations and corporations that I've extended myself, and they may get 1 or 2 phone calls and they have 100 people in the room.
Right.
People don't take advantage of the expertise and how much time people are willing to invest in community. But if you never ask and you never take any action on that, it won't happen.
Wow. That's good advice. Juanita, what are you most proud of in your career?
I'm a mentor. And so I've been doing this work for a while now. And so I love it. And so again, I'm part of several organizations. So one is AFP of Greater Atlanta. And so during that time, I was able to serve as a mentor in their diverse mentoring program.
Yes.
And so I've had 5 mentees and over the years. And to this day, I still keep up with each and every one of them. We still have coffees and check-ins. And so once I get a mentee, there are continue to be someone who I keep up with and help in the line and help them to move forward. I think what I'm most happy about with all of them is that once I mentored them all, and this with all humility, they all got promoted. And they're still all in the fundraising field. And so I think that's the thing I'm most happy about.
Well, I can't let you go until we talk about faith and fundraising. I know that you are a woman of God. I know that you see the intersection of fundraising and faith, as I do. And I just have to ask you about that. I know you were doing some work in that space for a while. What do you think about fundraising as a ministry?
I think it is. I think that as we look at even Giving USA the report, we see the amount of money and funds that are invested within the faith community. And if you look at them more closely, you'll see that there's actually a decline year over year. Even though there's a lot of money that's still being poured into the faith community, there is actually a decline. And so in speaking to some of my friends and colleagues, they said it's because the faith community is the one nonprofit sector that has yet to professionalize the development field. Mm-hmm. Our churches will not hire or even consider a development professional. So it's not just about you raising up and doing a chicken dinner or a fish fry. There's some strategy behind how do we do what we do. And someone asked me, even in this, forums, is like, well, what about the respect of persons? It's like, but who invests in your company and your organization should be able to get deeper insights into some things. And the more you share with your congregation about what you're doing and your successes and your impact on the community, people will just give because they can.
Right.
And it's not just you have not because you ask not, but now it's more of they want to be informed. And the truth is, we're being treated better in the nonprofit sector in every other area and not in our churches. Mm-hmm. So I can give money to a Big Brothers and Big Sisters. I can give money to, I don't know, Agape, community center, and I'll get a thank you or get invited to an event. In my church, the most I get is maybe, at the beginning of the year, I get my tax information, if I still use that. But that's the thing I think that we don't get, that we are in the faith community at a disadvantage right now, and that everyone else has grown and nurtured over the years in this field. And we have yet to pick up that model for what we need to do differently.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think that church membership is down, right? People are not going to church the way they used to, and they're not going in the building, right? And so sometimes even that impacts whether they will give or not. And certainly the thank yous. I recently volunteered at my church on Easter, and was surprised and pleased that my pastor sent me a note, and my son, we both volunteered. He got his own separate envelope. I got an envelope that said, thank you so much for volunteering with us on Easter Sunday. We could not have pulled that Sunday off without you, blah, 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 blah. And I was just so surprised and pleased to see that my pastor sent me a handwritten note in a card, thanking me for volunteering on Easter Sunday. And then you don't realize how far that really goes with people, just giving that personal touch to make them feel like you really appreciate them being there.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Shout out to your pastor.
Last thing before we run. Okay, if you had a superpower, what would it be?
I'm a fundraiser. My superpower, I was thinking about this a little bit, and I was like, I have two. But one would be, I think, a mind reader. So a lot of times that's what we're trying to do. I'm trying to understand. My daughters may tell me one thing, but they may be thinking another. Mm-hmm. If I'm able to discern, some things outside of what I'm able to pick up just naturally, I feel like that's a gifting to be able to do that. And it's like, okay, because then I know how to guide the conversation another way, But the other thing, for me, if I could have an opportunity, I don't know, it's a deep one. And I think about this a little bit, is if I could change people's hearts.
Oh, I love that one.
Because especially with donors, sometimes people have bad experiences, but helping people to see the good and to see where the land needs healing. Yes. And if I can get people from having stony hearts.
I love it.
And give them, another sense of empathy and compassion, I think we have a more given society. So that's what makes it.
See, Juanita, this is the prime reason. This is the example of why I wanted to do this F3 in the Light series, because I want the world to know how fabulous our members are. You have dropped some pearls of wisdom for us today. So thank you so much for sharing your experience and your insight and some really good tidbits for our fundraisers and our nonprofits in terms of foundation giving. So thank you so much for that. And I'll see you around.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.